Rage is in no short supply. Even in the idyllic countryside near the borders of Lorraine, Bretonnia has seen its fair share of misery, even as the cool breeze blows and the sun shines down on another gorgeous day. The Wildwood awakens, and Durthu is on the warpath once more. Today, we're answering a question no one was asking: can the Wood Elves trade blow for blow in a melee grind versus Khorne? Bladesingers might just be the key. But in the realms of chaos, an exalted bloodthirster is training for the big show, flexing those muscles and whistling Eye of the Tiger in the run-up to Immortal Empires. And he leads a war host in Durthu's home turf, whose infamous hatred of demons may just see him through this coming darkness, or consume his very soul. Wood Elves, Khorne, new maps, and old units trying their hand versus the Lord of Skulls. Now you might think Durthu would be a massive risk versus the Blood God here. After all, he's a tree, and trees do not like fire, axes, or flaming axes, and maybe you'd be right. When you look at his stats and abilities, he certainly has the power to take on a Bloodthirster and win. And he can't be shot in this matchup, which has always been one of his biggest weaknesses. So let them try to fell this mighty oak if they can. He will stand his ground and chop them to pieces with the Sword of Daeth. Be paired with a Spellsinger, Earthblood, and Regrowth, and Bladesingers will be the core of this army. Very interesting unit interactions on the way, because they should absolutely cyclone their way through Chaos Warriors, but against Bloodletters, particularly exalted ones, they're going to beat the brakes off each other as they bypass each other's resistance. And something even sneakier is afoot, because the Wild Hunters of Khorne are hidden, and they are also pure glass cannons. They might wall up some demons this game, or they might die in like 5 seconds flat. Not a unit the Wood Elves can afford to lose early, but maybe one of the only good options Azrai have against Fleshhounds with their magic attacks, bonus first large, and great combat stats. And sure enough, there are plenty of Fleshhounds in this build, an absolute terror for so many factions in Immortal Empires to deal with. They're led by an exalted Bloodthirster with Bloodthirst and Bellow of Fury. Gonna be very interesting to see who comes out on top in this inevitable battle with Durthu. Tons of Chaos Warriors, Bloodletters on the flanks, and the Hell-Forged host in the center, which is arguably the best anti-infantry unit in all of Mortal Empires. Just a stupid stat line, a powerful charge, and flaming attacks for the trees. So Wood Elves have their work cut out for them here for sure. They're going to try and out-melee the melee powerhouse in Warhammer Fantasy, and this is a powerful melee rush even for Khorne. They've invested heavily in it. But if anyone on their roster can make this work, it's Durthu Oakheart. So let's see if they can make like a tree and get the hell out of here. The reason this even has the potential to work is that most Khorne players are going to expect minimal forest spirits, and a kite-focused mobility build is probably what most people will go for, centered around Weight Watchers maybe. So if you catch them off guard with the Bladesinger rush, might just have the upper hand. The Exalted of Khorne is on the prowl, searching for something to breathe magma at, and I'll be totally honest, I forgot that Bloodthirsters have breath attacks at the start of this match, so Eternal Guard will not dodge this one in time, and quite a few of them will join the Immolation Initiative. Nicely lined up, not perfect, not flush with the flank of the unit, but still going to do a lot of damage. A much bigger problem in this game, though, is that Fleshhounds will absolutely dominate Glade Riders in a straight-up fight, so we gotta get sneaky to even out this mobility game. Glade Riders here are bait. They're gonna back up, ceding ground on the right flank, enticing the doggos to move forward, and if the Fleshhounds take that bait, then the Wild Hunters of Khorne can scream in from their ambush position, pin them down, and possibly take 2 full units off the field early. People tend to keep their cavalry units together, so if you have a group of them and they're all visible, your opponent is much less likely to expect hidden troops. That's why you pretty much never want to hide all your cav. But yeah, the fact that Glade Riders trade so terribly into Fleshhounds has pretty big implications for this matchup, because Khorne Dogs will kill any of their infantry by cycle charging too. So you gotta get creative to get rid of their speed. A nice little infantry bait here too. Eternal Guard retreating to ensure that Bladesingers get their full formation into base contact against Chaos Warriors, where they should be dominant with their high AP values. And in the center, the exact same thing is happening with Khorne. A beautifully timed Chaos Warrior feint and retreat to set up a clean charge for the Hellforged host against the Winterheart Guard, who are unbreakable. So they should be able to last for at least a little bit, right? We'll check back on that in a moment, because the ambush is sprung, and it is going to be perfect. Fleshhounds filled the void where the Glade Riders retreated. They did not see the Wild Hunters hidden in the trees, and now a classic hammer and anvil will isolate and utterly demolish both Fleshhounds of Khorne, which is exactly what the Wood Elves need to open up this battlefield. First unit just completely melted. Now, take a look at this, dude. I have never seen anything like it. It's been 17 seconds, The Winterheart Guard are dead. I literally blinked, and my unbreakable 54 melee defense Eternal Guard disappeared. Why did they die so quickly? Well, they had an attack order on the Chaos Warriors who retreated, so that charge carried them further into the Hellforged host than they would probably like to be. It means that the Bloodletters got more units into base contact and slaughtered that infantry regiment faster than I have ever seen a unit die. Absolutely insane. They're unbreakable, and they're going to last not as long as zombies, not as long as goblins or noblars. They have 54 melee defense, and it might as well have been 0. So my center is in tatters, and that's obviously a big problem. Durthu realizes he's in danger now because Hellforged Host and Exalted Bloodthirster together would absolutely beat the brakes off of him, but he dropped a nice Sword of Daith, and the Bladesingers have already routed off some of the Khornate warriors. So the melee grind is not going that bad for the Wood Elves at the start. They're able to eliminate 2 full units of Fleshhounds of Khorne. They've eliminated a full unit of Chaos Warriors, and both Bladesingers are taking the engagements they need to take an early lead in this fight. And this is the advantage the Azrai really need to push. Chaos Warriors will be able to last a lot longer than those Winterheart Guard did, but if the Bladesingers can dominate them in melee, it'll leave the Bloodletters isolated, and then the Wild Hunters of Khorne can come in for those classic hammer and anvil plays and maybe turn things. Another gorgeous breath attack from that Exalted Bloodthirster, and now the Glade Riders are forced into combat with Fleshhounds of Khorne, and they're pretty much just going to be roadblocks. But if they get their charge and Fleshhounds don't, they'll maybe do okay here, and they've managed to clear out one in the back line. Here come the Wild Hunters of Khorne, and there are some isolated Bloodletters out on the Khornate left flank. Fleshhounds and the Bloodthirster are not in a position to reinforce them, so a clean charge in, leave them in for about 8 to 10 seconds, you'll get the full use of your charge bonus, then retreat. Yes, the Wild Hunters will have their physical resistance bypassed, but they'll still deal a lot of damage on that charge, and that's certainly a worthy trade for the Azrai. Durthu back into the thick of it in the center, and he will be surrounded by the Hellforged host, those Exalted Bloodletters with their flaming attacks, but alongside some Glade Riders to soak up some of the flaming damage. Should not be a bad fight for him at all. That Sword of Daith is flashing, and it will reap a terrible toll in and amongst these elite Khornate infantry. Well, the Eternal Guard, the remnants of them anyway, charging back into the fore and holding on around their lord. Try to keep the hell away from these Fleshhounds, which are almost the exact same speed as the Glade Riders, and I think if they get into charge range, they can actually catch them. Lamentation of Despair, spreading all kinds of malevolent little sprites amongst the Blood God Center, though it's always a finicky ability to use while Durthu's in melee. And they've managed to blunt the Khornate advance here, while the Glade Riders run for their lives, and the third and final Bloodthirster Breath Attack goes through. Glade Riders are going to try to take a 2v1 engagement against Fleshhounds of Khorne. We'll be very curious to see how that goes, although the Bloodthirster just landed in and amongst them in what I would assume is an attempt to try to take the Life Mage off the field and prevent all her support and healing for Durthu. Wild Hunters of Khorne charging into the back of the Chaos Warriors, but I think they want to try to free up the Glade Riders in the rear. Not sure they're going to be able to get back there in time. Most of the Glade Riders have routed off, and with the help of the Terror from the Exalted Bloodthirster, those Fleshhounds were able to clear them out no problem at all. And the Bladesingers managed to kill off a full unit of Chaos Warriors, and they did so without losing too much HP, but they didn't do it incredibly fast either. That probably took about 2.5 minutes to finish that engagement. And speed is of the essence here as Durthu tries desperately to run away from the Exalted Bloodthirster and the Hellforged host. Fleshhounds will be able to pin him down from behind and will likely finish off these Glade Riders, but it's a pretty nice Sword of Daith. Wild Hunters of Khorne collapsing into the center now too, and Eternal Guard fighting some Chaos Warriors over near the edges of the map. Big time Earthblood in the center will help support these Bladesingers. Wild Hunters realize they must retreat. They will get a heal, but there's so many infantry in the middle around that Bloodthirster. Wood Elves don't want to take a drag-it-out fight in that kind of scenario. But Durthu is topped off. He's healed up. And he can deal with these Fleshhounds of Khorne. He can grind through almost limitless amounts of infantry as long as that Bloodthirster is indisposed. And at the moment, he's chasing after units that simply he cannot catch. So he'll turn around, He'll activate his Bloodthirst for the extra speed and charge bonus, and come back in for the duel while the Hellforged hosts finally crumble out. Those terrors in the night are gone and defeated, but there's a lot left for Durthu to do, and he'll need to share that load with the Bladesingers, who have so much infantry to cut through. This is what they're meant for. It's what they're born and bred for. But Khornate Chaos Warriors have good stats, and you will slowly get ground down over time. Wild Hunters of Khorne with an Earthblood on them. They just don't want to stay in melee for too long, because that Exalted Bloodthirster is always there in the shadows, waiting on the wings. But as long as they don't get caught out, this is honestly ideal. The fact that they're distracting the Bloodthirster away from Durthu to give him more time to tear out some of this infantry, it's really important, because some of them have lost Frenzy, and they will run as they get lower in HP and leadership. Fleshhounds are still alive though. Horn of Khorne was activated. The Chaos Warhounds coming out of the trees. Wild Hunters of Khorne realize they have to commit, because they're going to get pinned down otherwise. Their only hope there is to break through them quickly. They will do so, but that burning whip from the Exalted Bloodthirster, flaying the skin from their bones, charring them, cutting them to pieces, and that is a terror rout with Fleshhounds waiting right there to sandwich them as they run. That's a big loss for the Azrai here. Certainly not out of it yet, but that is painful. They would have liked to have some Cav in the late game, particularly magical attack Cav, that could pin down the Bloodthirster and maybe cyclocharge some of these demonic units. Horn of Khorne about to wear off. Durthu popping Foeseeker. Bloodthirst is activated, and now the Oakheart himself, cut off, surrounded, in a trial by fire. What can he do in the face of all this adversity? Number one priority is get rid of those damn Fleshhounds so they won't nibble at his butt as he attempts to engage this Bloodthirster. Spellsinger baiting them away from Durthu himself. Eternal Guard charging into the center, whatever remains of them. Spellsinger somehow unable to get away from Fleshhounds, even though she is faster. That extra charge speed is just insane, and they have so much mass, she's having trouble getting away. But Durthu is beating the brakes off that Bloodthirster and doesn't seem to be taking too much damage in return. That Flaming Whip, even though it should have 25% extra damage against him, he's just tanky as hell, and he has been a beast all game long. Spellsinger popping her Opal Amulet to try to escape, but once again, the charge speed on the Fleshhounds will allow them to catch up and stun her, and once she's stunned once, she'll probably get surrounded, so she may not be able to get away, but she's done her job. She sent a lot of important heals Durthu's way, and now one final one to keep him in the fight while he's surrounded by Bloodletters and the Exalted. And guess what? Durthu Oakheart is not done. He is going to continue winning this duel despite the fact that he is utterly and completely surrounded. Even Horn of Khorne is not going to save that Bloodthirster if he decides to stay in the melee grind. Look at how much his HP has dropped over the last minute or so. Durthu landing attack after attack and killing so much infantry, but it's not going to be enough. The mage was caught out, killed by the Fleshhounds, who are just absolute terrors in this matchup, man. They are so hard to deal with, and Durthu was not able to carry the day, but he did put in a ton of work. I'll tell you who didn't, though. Those Winterheart Guard, who had one of the most embarrassing performances of any unit I have ever seen in the Total War Warhammer trilogy. Absolutely insane. 0 kills, 43 damage value. They were misplayed, obviously, chasing after the Chaos Warriors, but usually what happens is they'll run into whatever other infantry is there, they'll stop, they'll form up again, and then they'll fight. And in this case, they just got utterly demolished. I have never seen anything like it. It was literally 15 or 17 seconds, and then they just died. They completely, an unbreakable unit with 54 MD disappeared. I would expect them to lose that fight handily, don't get me wrong. Just the speed at which they did so for an unbreakable unit was shocking to me. Durthu with 3,400 damage value, though, just destroyed that Bloodthirster every time he tried to fight him. He was forced to run multiple times because Durthu kept killing the infantry, kept landing attacks on the Bloodthirster in the middle of the fight. Wild Hunters of Khorne weren't amazing this game. They had the gorgeous ambush. They had some nice hammer and anvils, but ultimately it felt like they just kind of got dragged down due to their low armor and the fact that they cannot rely on that physical resistance. So I'll have to do some more theory crafting. I think, generally speaking, melee rushing against Khorne will probably not be the meta for the Azrai, but an interesting thought experiment nonetheless. I do think that kiting using nets, making sure you just avoid melee entirely and just going full mobility probably makes some more sense, but it got a lot closer than maybe even I expected it to. The Bladesingers performed well against the demons and the Khornate Chaos Warriors, but ultimately they just had a little bit too much killing power, and one of their Fleshhounds got 2,300 damage value. This is a 650 gold unit. They are such a problem for low armor factions. They're such a problem for the elves. I'll be very curious to see how a full kite build goes against Khorne, but this was a fun one nonetheless, and it was cool to see Durthu channel his rage versus the Blood God.